This is why people hate you. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to instantly dislike you, even when you've done nothing wrong? It's as if, no matter how kind, respectful, or genuine you are, someone still meets you with a cold stare or a distant attitude. Why is that? Why do certain people harbor feelings of resentment or hostility toward us without a clear reason? The truth is, these reactions are often not about you at all. More often, they're a reflection of that person's inner world, unspoken envy, unresolved insecurities, or silent battles they've never faced. These emotions can build quietly and irrationally, forming invisible walls between people. Sometimes a simple misunderstanding or your very presence can awaken feelings they're not ready to confront. But understanding these hidden causes isn't just interesting, it's powerful. Because when you know what drives others to dislike you, you also gain the wisdom to stop blaming yourself and start protecting your peace. In this video, we're going to break down 10 surprising reasons why people secretly hate you and how Stoic philosophy can help you respond not with anger or confusion, but with clarity, strength, and confidence. These insights could change the way you see your relationships, and more importantly, how you carry yourself through life. Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here. Your support, your presence, and your thoughtful comments mean more than you know. I read every single one, and they inspire me to keep creating content that speaks to the soul. If this is your first time watching, hit that like button and turn on notifications so you won't miss any future lessons on Stoic strength, resilience, and inner peace. Now let's begin this eye-opening journey together. 1. Envy and jealousy. Envy and jealousy are some of the most powerful and destructive emotions in the human experience, and they are often disguised beneath smiles, polite conversations, or even silence. One of the most common and painful reasons someone might dislike you, without you ever doing them harm, is because of envy. Not because you hurt them. Not because you offended them. But simply because you are something they are not. Or you have something they feel they can't reach. Maybe it's your confidence. Maybe it's your discipline. Maybe it's your peace, your purpose, your clarity, or your ability to keep moving forward when others would have broken down. To someone battling their own inner turmoil, that can be unbearable to witness. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your presence reminds them of the version of themselves they wish they could become, but don't know how. This is where resentment begins to take root. It doesn't come from logic, it comes from comparison. Envy turns admiration into bitterness. Instead of thinking, I want to grow like that person, they start thinking, why do they have what I don't? And when people feel like they're falling behind in life, they sometimes try to balance the scale by tearing others down instead of building themselves up. That's why some people gossip. That's why they make passive-aggressive comments. That's why they suddenly go cold. It's not because of anything you did, it's because of the storm raging inside them. Envy is often unspoken, but its effects are felt deeply. It can create tension in conversations, invisible walls in relationships, and lingering discomfort that seems to have no clear cause. Sometimes a person will smile to your face and secretly hope you fail. Other times, they'll openly distance themselves from you without ever explaining why. And this can hurt, especially when it comes from people you care about. But this is where the teachings of Stoicism offer us clarity and strength. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Their envy is not your burden to carry. It's not your job to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. It's not your duty to change who you are to ease someone else's discomfort with themselves. Understand this. The brighter your light shines, the more you will expose what others are hiding in the dark. And not everyone is ready to face that. Some people are triggered by your peace because they are still at war with themselves. Your success highlights their failures. Your self-control reveals their chaos. Your growth makes them feel stuck. But their feelings are not your fault. They are a mirror of their own internal struggle. Instead of letting their jealousy poison your peace, take the Stoic path. Choose to rise above it. Choose to see their resentment not as a personal attack, but as a silent signal that they are hurting inside. Do not take their negativity personally. Do not absorb what doesn't belong to you. Protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. It's easy to feel discouraged when you face hate that seems unjustified. But remember, people don't throw stones at what's broken. They throw stones at what shines. And if you find yourself being resented for your strength, your success, or your spirit, take it as confirmation that you are doing something right. The hate you receive is often the price you pay for refusing to live small. So stay the course. Keep doing the work. Keep growing. Keep healing. Let your example challenge others to rise, not because you force them to, but because you inspire them to. And if they can't handle that, that's not your problem. You are not here to appease people's insecurities. You are here to fulfill your purpose, live with honor, and walk your path with courage. So let the envious whisper. Let them judge. Let them misunderstand you. You've got more important things to focus on, like becoming the strongest, calmest, and most grounded version of yourself. Envy may follow you, but it doesn't have to define you. It may chase you, but it doesn't have to catch you. What defines you is how you respond, with patience, with wisdom, and with a heart too full of purpose to be shaken by someone else's emptiness. That is the Stoic way. 2. Misunderstandings and ineffective communication. Sometimes the hatred people hold towards you doesn't come from jealousy or envy, it comes from confusion. One of the most overlooked reasons why people may silently resent you is simple yet powerful: misunderstanding. Communication is the foundation of every human relationship, yet so often it's built on assumptions, tone misinterpretations, or incomplete information. A single comment taken out of context, a facial expression misunderstood, or a silence interpreted. The wrong way can start a chain reaction that slowly turns connection into conflict. And the most frustrating part, you might not even realize it's happening. You could be doing your best to be clear and kind, but the message received isn't the one you intended. Words are fragile tools. We assume people understand what we mean, but in reality, they only hear what they're ready to hear, filtered through their own emotions, past experiences, and insecurities. A neutral statement might come off as harsh. A joke might be taken as an insult. A look might be perceived as judgment. And without proper clarification, people start filling in the blanks with their own fears. Over time, these little misunderstandings accumulate. The person starts building a version of you in their head that isn't real. They begin to see you not for who you are, but for who they believe you are based on a moment, a phrase, or a misread gesture. Their perception hardens, and once they've decided you're cold, arrogant, or condescending, even if you're not, it becomes nearly impossible to change their mind. The relationship begins to break down, not because of cruelty, but because of miscommunication left unresolved. Stoic philosophy reminds us of something incredibly powerful here. We are only responsible for what we can control. And while we can strive to be thoughtful, clear, and respectful, we cannot control how others interpret what we say or do. As Epictetus once taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When faced with miscommunication, you have two choices: react defensively or respond with wisdom and grace. And often the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask, "Can we talk about this?" Or, "I think there may have been a misunderstanding." But here's where maturity truly shines. It's not about forcing others to understand you. It's about being at peace even when they don't. You can explain yourself, apologize if needed, and offer clarity, but you can't control whether someone chooses to forgive, let go, or see you differently. Sometimes people want to hold on to their version of the story because it fits their narrative better, and in those moments, you must stand strong in who you are, rather than crumbling under who they think you are. The truth is, ineffective communication isn't always about words. It's also about listening. When someone feels unheard, they grow distant. When someone feels dismissed, they grow resentful. And so often the real damage happens not when we speak, but when we fail to listen, genuinely, openly, and without defensiveness. Listening doesn't mean agreement. It means offering someone the space to feel seen and understood, and that small act can dissolve more resentment than any explanation ever could. Of course, there will be times when you try to repair the misunderstanding, and it still doesn't work. That's when you must protect your peace. Not everyone is meant to understand you. Not every conflict can be resolved, and not every misunderstanding is yours to fix. Let go of the need to be liked, accepted, or approved by everyone. That's a burden you were never meant to carry. Instead, focus on what you can do. Speak with intention, listen with presence, and clarify when needed. Be open, but never beg to be understood. Be honest, but never feel guilty for someone else's misinterpretation of your truth. Let your life be a reflection of clarity, even if others choose to see it through a fogged lens. Remember, many of the conflicts you face won't come from real offenses, but from imagined ones. And your job is not to chase down every false impression. Your job is to live with integrity. Let the strength of your character speak louder than anyone's assumptions. In time, truth has a way of revealing itself, and the people who matter most will see you clearly, not because you forced them to, but because they took the time to understand. That's the Stoic approach. Speak your truth, clear your conscience, and let the rest go. 3. Differences in fundamental values and beliefs. Sometimes the reason someone dislikes you has nothing to do with your actions, your words, or even your presence. It has everything to do with the values you represent. In a world as diverse as ours, every person walks around carrying a unique set of beliefs, molded by their upbringing, culture, personal experiences, and environment. These values shape the lens through which they interpret the world. And when someone comes along who challenges that lens, the result is often discomfort, and in many cases, resentment. Think about it. If someone has spent their entire life believing that success must look a certain way, and then you show up living by a completely different standard, one they don't understand or even disagree with, they might view you not as someone different, but as someone wrong. It could be as simple as your work ethic, your lifestyle choices, your spiritual beliefs, or your stance on what matters most in life. You don't have to argue with them or even speak a word. Just being who you are can sometimes feel threatening to someone whose values oppose yours. What makes this even more complex is that many people aren't aware of how deeply attached they are to their own values. These beliefs become part of their identity, and any perceived challenge to those beliefs can feel like a personal attack. So when you live authentically and stand firm in your truth, they may react defensively, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your existence confronts them with the possibility that they might not have all the answers. And for many, that possibility is too unsettling to accept. This is why even small disagreements can escalate into intense emotional reactions. A difference in values about family, ambition, freedom, or even how to spend your free time can spark a conflict if the other person isn't secure in their own perspective. Suddenly, a harmless conversation becomes a battlefield of unspoken judgments. Without realizing it, people begin building emotional walls between themselves and others who simply see life differently. But here's where Stoic philosophy offers us an invaluable perspective. Not every disagreement needs to become a battle. As Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. That's the danger of rigid thinking. It blocks growth, connection, and empathy. When people cling too tightly to their own worldview, they fail to understand that someone else's truth might be just as valid, even if it's different. The Stoic path teaches us to accept that others will see the world differently, and that's okay. Your job is not to force people to agree with you or to gain their approval. Your job is to live with integrity, to act in accordance with your values, and to extend respect to others even when they don't offer the same in return. That's what separates those who are truly wise from those who are simply loud. Wisdom doesn't shout, it listens, it understands, it remains calm when others react. Of course, this doesn't mean you should compromise your principles just to keep the peace. Standing firm in what you believe is part of living an authentic life. But it does mean you can approach disagreements with patience instead of pride, and curiosity instead of condemnation. You can recognize when someone's hostility isn't really about you. It's about the internal tension they feel when their worldview is challenged. What's powerful is that once you embrace this mindset, you stop taking things so personally. You no longer feel the need to argue, defend, or explain yourself endlessly. You find peace in knowing that your values don't need to be validated by everyone around you, and by doing so, you give others the freedom to live their truth too, without judgment, without bitterness. In many cases, people are not looking for understanding, they are looking for agreement. And when they don't get it, they turn that disappointment into dislike. But let that be their burden to carry, not yours. You are not responsible for other people's emotional reactions to your authenticity. True harmony doesn't come from everyone thinking the same. It comes from being able to coexist with mutual respect. So, if your values clash with someone else's and it creates distance, let it. Not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Some are meant to teach you how strong you've become, strong enough to stay grounded in your truth without needing constant validation. Live your values. Honor your path, and let others walk theirs, even if it leads them away from you. That is the essence of inner freedom, and that is what it means to be truly Stoic. 4. The influence of rumors and gossip. One of the most devastating reasons people may secretly hate you has nothing to do with who you really are, but with who they've been told you are. In many cases, the judgment others carry isn't even based on first-hand experience. It's built on whispers, twisted narratives, or exaggerated stories that have been passed from one person to another. Gossip is like wildfire. Once it starts, it spreads quickly, leaving damage behind long before the truth has any chance to catch up. And the tragedy is, you may never even get the chance to defend yourself. Rumors don't need to be true to be powerful. They just need to be entertaining, emotional, or believable enough for people to pass them along. And in a world driven by assumptions and surface-level thinking, the more sensational the rumor, the more traction it gains. Before you know it, someone has made a judgment about your character based not on anything you did, but on a version of your life they've never even verified. You become a villain in someone else's story, a story you didn't write, and that may not even be remotely close to reality. This is the painful part of navigating social relationships. People will talk, they will assume, they will spread their version of events, especially when it helps them feel more important or gives them something exciting to say. And the more your life stands out, the more successful, calm, or self-assured you are, the more tempting it becomes for others to pull you back down into the noise. Gossip is rarely about truth. It's about power, and people use it to control perception, manipulate opinion, or gain social leverage. But here's the Stoic truth. You cannot spend your life chasing every false story. You cannot waste your energy trying to correct every misconception. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. This is the mindset of true power, recognizing that while you can't stop people from talking, you can absolutely control how much of your peace you allow them to take. Let people talk. Let them misunderstand you. Let them gossip behind your back. Their words don't define your character. Your actions do. And the more you focus on building a life of integrity, consistency, and calm strength, the more their rumors will lose their sting. The truth doesn't always rise immediately, but it always outlasts the lie. There will be times when you feel the urge to defend yourself, to prove to others that the stories being spread aren't true. And while there's nothing wrong with clarifying the facts when it truly matters, most of the time, your best response is no response at all. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You've realized that trying to win over people committed to misunderstanding you is not a wise use of your time. And when you stop explaining yourself to people who never cared to know you in the first place, you reclaim your power. The Stoic approach is not to fight fire with fire, but to become fireproof. Don't let gossip dictate your emotions. Don't let rumors steal your joy. And most of all, don't allow the fear of being misrepresented to cause you to live inauthentically. Continue being you, truthfully, openly, and unapologetically. Let your consistency speak for itself over time. Because while lies are loud, truth is patient, and the people who matter, the ones with wisdom and discernment, will always see through the noise. When you understand that gossip is more a reflection of the speaker than the subject, you begin to see it differently. Someone who spreads rumors is often dealing with their own insecurities, fears, or boredom. They are looking for relevance through drama, and while you can't silence them, you can rise above them. Their words only have the power you give them, so give them none. Protect your peace by guarding your energy. If the gossip is causing harm to your mental space, limit your exposure to toxic environments. Set clear boundaries. Don't be afraid to walk away from people who choose drama over truth. And when someone does take the time to get to know the real you, welcome that with humility. But don't depend on it. Your peace should never be built on others' perceptions. It should be built on your own clarity. In the end, your reputation is not defined by what others say in the dark. It is defined by what you continue to do in the light. So walk forward with honor. Let your actions be louder than their rumors. And remember, gossip fades, but character endures. 5. Personal insecurities and projection. Another deeply rooted reason people may secretly hate you has nothing to do with you personally, but everything to do with the emotional wounds they carry inside. When someone hasn't faced their insecurities, when they're quietly struggling with self-doubt, failure, or fear, they often begin projecting those feelings onto others. You become the target, not because of anything you've said or done, but because you represent something they're avoiding within themselves. It's a hard truth to accept. Some people will hate you simply because you're free. because you're bold enough to speak your mind, because you walk with calm self-assurance, or because you chase your goals without hesitation. Your strength might remind them of their weakness. Your clarity might highlight their confusion. Your growth might magnify their stagnation. And instead of using your example as inspiration, they turn it into ammunition, believing that by tearing you down they can feel better about where they are. This process is known as projection, and it's a psychological defense mechanism that helps people cope with emotions they're too uncomfortable to deal with directly. Rather than admit they feel inferior, they label you as arrogant. Rather than confront their own laziness, they call you obsessive. Rather than acknowledge their fear of failure, they hope you'll stumble just so they won't feel so alone. It's not personal, it's protection from their own inner mirror. The Stoic response to this is not anger, and it's certainly not revenge. It's understanding. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And this rings especially true when it comes to the imagined flaws others project onto us. The person resenting you isn't really resenting you. They're resenting a version of you that exists only in their mind, shaped by the shadow of their own insecurities, and your greatest power lies in refusing to carry the emotional weight of someone else's unhealed wounds. You see, the more grounded and centered you become, the more others will be triggered, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they are still searching for the balance you found. And this can show up in subtle ways. Sarcasm that stings a little too hard, compliments with an edge, or sudden silence when you share something you're proud of. These are signs that someone isn't happy, not with you, but with themselves. And yet it's easy to take this personally. It's easy to start questioning yourself, wondering if you've done something wrong. But that's where Stoic discipline must kick in. You must train your mind to separate yourself from the storm around you. Not everything someone says is a reflection of reality. It's often a reflection of their current emotional state. And emotional maturity means learning to observe without absorbing. Here's the real test of strength. Can you remain kind in the face of projection? Can you stay rooted in self-respect even when others try to project their pain onto you? Can you keep growing, shining, and showing up, despite the discomfort it causes in others? Because the truth is, your light will always irritate those still hiding in the dark. But that's not a sign to dim yourself. It's a sign to keep going. And if you feel someone's resentment growing toward you, take a moment of compassion. Not pity, but understanding. They're doing the best they can with what they know. You may not be able to help them see things differently, but you can at least refuse to let their pain infect your peace. That alone is an act of strength. You don't need to fix their insecurities. You don't need to over-explain, apologize for your growth, or shrink yourself to fit their comfort zone. What you need is to stay steady in your lane, focused on your own development, and free from the need to be liked by those still battling their own demons. Because at the end of the day, people will project onto you what they haven't healed within themselves. And your role is not to become smaller for their comfort. It's to be a living example that healing, peace, and power are possible. That life doesn't have to be driven by fear and comparison. And maybe, just maybe, your courage to live authentically will one day spark a shift in them too. So let them project, let them misunderstand, let them judge. You keep walking in truth. You keep growing. And most of all, you keep protecting your peace from the projections of others because you've worked too hard to lose yourself trying to carry someone else's pain. 6. Lack of empathy and understanding. Sometimes the reason people dislike you is because they simply don't understand you. And not just in the way people sometimes miss each other's meaning, but on a deeper level because they lack the emotional awareness to even try. A lack of empathy is one of the most powerful, yet invisible sources of resentment. When someone is unwilling or unable to step into your shoes, to see life from your perspective, misunderstandings fester, assumptions grow, and hostility takes root where compassion should have lived. Empathy is not just a nice trait. It's the glue that holds human relationships together. It's the ability to pause your own thoughts long enough to consider someone else's. But when that capacity is missing, communication becomes cold. Actions are misinterpreted. Intentions are twisted. And you, regardless of your efforts or kindness, can end up being seen as selfish, arrogant, or even malicious, simply because the other person didn't take the time to understand your heart. This lack of empathy often doesn't come from cruelty, but from self-absorption. Many people are so consumed by their own thoughts, their own struggles, and their own narratives that they have no room left to hold space for someone else's experience. They judge quickly, they assume easily, they make conclusions without curiosity. And once they've labeled you in their mind, they rarely take the time to revise that judgment. Stoic wisdom teaches us that perception is everything. As Epictetus put it, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But when someone lacks empathy, they reverse that ratio. They speak first, judge first, assume first, and they do so without ever slowing down to ask, what else might be true here? In their world, if you don't respond the way they expect, you're rude. If you don't agree with them, you're difficult. If you prioritize your peace, you're cold. And this kind of rigid thinking turns people into walking triggers, reactive to anything that doesn't align with their narrow worldview. When people lack empathy, they also lack depth. They see the surface of your actions, but not the soul behind them. They don't understand your story, your pain, your growth, your intentions. They just see what's convenient for them to see. And this is where resentment begins to build. Because instead of asking why you do what you do, they invent reasons that fit their emotional narrative. They believe their assumptions are facts, and as a result, their dislike for you grows not from truth, but from emotional fiction. So how do you deal with this as a Stoic? The answer is not to beg for understanding or to explain yourself endlessly to those who aren't even listening. The Stoic path is about inner control. You do not need to be understood by everyone. You do not need empathy from everyone to continue living in alignment with your values. You simply need to know who you are, and that has to be enough. At the same time, Stoicism also teaches us to embody the very thing others lack. When others fail to understand you, seek to understand them. Not to excuse their behavior, but to free yourself from resentment. If they're acting cold, maybe they're hurting. If they seem indifferent, maybe they're overwhelmed. If they speak harshly, maybe they were never taught how to communicate with kindness. You don't have to accept mistreatment, but you can choose not to mirror it. That's emotional power. That's self-mastery. And if they continue to misunderstand you despite your efforts, let them. Your peace does not depend on their perception. You were not put here to constantly explain yourself to people who are unwilling to listen. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, and continue living with grace, discipline, and authenticity. The Stoic way is not to build walls, but to build strength. Strength to remain compassionate in the face of coldness. Strength to remain calm in the face of judgment. Strength to walk away when someone refuses to see you clearly. And strength to keep loving your life even when others don't understand it. You will not be understood by everyone, and that's okay. What matters most is that you don't abandon yourself in the process of trying to be understood. Stay grounded, stay kind, stay true. And let your life be a quiet reminder that empathy is not just something to be received, it's something powerful to be lived. 7. Competition or rivalry. There's a quiet tension that can exist between people, one that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. It creeps into workplaces, friendships, even families. It's the feeling that someone is constantly comparing themselves to you, secretly measuring their worth against your progress. Over time, that silent competition can evolve into resentment, and suddenly someone you once trusted, respected, or didn't even see as a rival starts to view you as a threat. This is the hidden weight of rivalry, and it's one of the most common reasons why people secretly hate you. Rivalry isn't always loud or obvious. In fact, some of the deepest rivalries exist behind polite smiles and subtle jabs. The truth is, when someone begins to see you not as a person, but as a benchmark, it can completely shift how they interact with you. Your achievements no longer inspire them. They agitate them. Your growth no longer motivates them. It threatens them. And instead of celebrating your success, they begin to quietly root for your downfall. Why does this happen? Because comparison poisons contentment. When someone hasn't cultivated inner confidence, they look to external validation to measure their worth. And when they see you succeeding in ways they haven't, it shines a spotlight on the areas where they feel behind. Instead of asking, how can I grow too? They fall into the trap of asking, why not me? That question, left unchecked, breeds envy, and when envy festers, rivalry is born. Sometimes this rivalry shows up as subtle competition. Other times it becomes a full-blown emotional war. The person may start to downplay your achievements, criticize your choices, or compete with you over things that shouldn't even matter. You might find them copying you one day and criticizing you the next. It's confusing, exhausting, and disheartening, especially if you never saw them as a competitor to begin with. But Stoicism offers us a path through this emotional chaos. Marcus Aurelius warned against basing your peace on the behavior of others. In his Meditations, he reminded himself, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. That is the Stoic mindset. Instead of being drawn into a rivalry you never asked for, you return to your own lane. You focus on what you can control, your effort, your discipline, your values. It's tempting to engage, to prove your worth, to outperform, to defend. But that's not the Stoic way. The Stoic warrior doesn't fight petty battles. They rise above them. You don't need to prove you're better. You only need to prove that you are focused, steady, and uninterested in the noise. You win not by overpowering your rival, but by no longer playing the same game. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of someone's quiet animosity, understand that their rivalry is less about you and more about their own internal struggle. They see your growth as evidence of their stagnation. They see your success as proof of their delay. And because they don't yet know how to use that discomfort for self-growth, they turn it outward. You become the scapegoat for their unrealized potential. But you don't have to internalize their hate. You don't have to carry their comparison as a burden. You simply stay committed to your path. Because the truth is, your journey is not a race. There's no finish line you're trying to beat someone to. The only competition that matters is between who you were yesterday and who you are becoming today. If you can shift your mindset to this, something incredible happens. Your peace returns. You stop being distracted by the noise. You stop shrinking to make others feel comfortable. You stop over-explaining your wins or underplaying your ambition. You start to walk through life with the calm assurance of someone who is no longer trying to win, but trying to grow. And maybe, just maybe, your refusal to engage in toxic competition will challenge others to rethink how they approach success. Maybe your calm will inspire someone to leave comparison behind. Maybe your humility will show them that there's enough space for everyone to rise. So let them compete. Let them resent. Let them misunderstand your quiet focus for arrogance. You just keep going. Keep building, keep becoming. Because in the end, true greatness doesn't need to compete. It simply continues to evolve. 8. The influence of social expectations. Sometimes people don't hate you because of who you are, but because of who you refuse to be. One of the most underestimated reasons why people secretly resent you is your refusal to conform. When you choose to live life on your terms, stepping outside of tradition, culture, or expectation, it triggers something deep in those who still feel trapped by those very systems. You're not just being different, you're challenging their idea of what's acceptable, and for many that challenge is threatening. Society has a way of writing invisible scripts for all of us. You're expected to think a certain way, live a certain way, follow a path that others have walked without question. Get the degree, land the job, get married by a certain age, follow the rules, don't make noise, don't stand out too much. And when you decide not to follow that script, when you choose something unconventional, bold, or even uncertain, people start to whisper. They start to judge. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something unfamiliar. And what's unfamiliar is often feared. Many people have tied their identity so tightly to societal approval that they don't even realize they're living a life that isn't theirs. So when you show up choosing authenticity over acceptance, passion over predictability, or freedom over approval, it threatens them. Your courage highlights their compliance. Your boldness disrupts the comfort of their routine. You are proof that another way exists, and that alone can breed resentment. You might experience this in subtle ways. Maybe your family doesn't understand your life choices. Maybe your coworkers give you strange looks for not playing the office politics game. Maybe your friends quietly drift away because you no longer align with the lifestyle they've chosen. These social expectations are powerful, and when you step outside of them, the pushback can be quiet or loud, but it's almost always there. But Stoicism teaches us something powerful. The crowd is not always right. As Seneca once wrote, the approval of the unwise is meaningless. What matters is not how many people understand you, but how aligned you are with your principles. A Stoic doesn't live for applause. They live for truth. And sometimes that truth will set you apart. So how do you respond when people judge you for not following the herd? You stay grounded. You remember that your life is your own. You weren't born to fulfill other people's expectations. You were born to explore, to evolve, to build a life rooted in meaning, not compliance. And that means making choices that others may never understand. It means being okay with misunderstanding. It means building an inner resilience so strong that no amount of external judgment can shake your direction. You may have to walk away from environments that no longer serve you. You may have to redefine what success means for you. You may have to disappoint people who once placed you in a box. But all of that is a small price to pay for the freedom of living a life that feels true to your soul. And while others may criticize you, what they're really confronting is their own fear. Fear that they settled too early. Fear that they gave up on their dreams. Fear that their life has been shaped more by expectation than by intention. And when they see you walking freely, it becomes a mirror they're not ready to look into. But you can choose to respond with grace. Not arrogance, not defensiveness, just calm assurance. You don't need to fight for your freedom. You simply need to walk in it. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Let your peace, your purpose, and your consistency speak for you. When you embrace this mindset, something shifts. You stop needing permission. You stop seeking validation. You become fully alive in your own path. And that is one of the most powerful things a person can become. Not because it makes everyone love you, but because it frees you from the fear of being misunderstood. Remember, the Stoic way is not about rebellion for its own sake. It's about alignment. Living in accordance with your values, your reason, and your truth, even when it's unpopular. And if that makes others uncomfortable, let them sit with that discomfort. Maybe over time they'll see the strength in your way, or maybe they won't. Either way, you stay the course, because you weren't meant to live a life dictated by the crowd. You were meant to live with courage, with clarity, and with the kind of freedom that only comes when you stop trying to meet expectations and start living by your own design. 9. The lack of recognition. One of the most quietly painful reasons why people may come to resent you is this. They feel overlooked in almost every environment, whether it's a workplace, a friendship, a family, or a community. People crave recognition. They want their efforts to be seen, their value acknowledged, and their presence validated. And when they don't receive that recognition, bitterness begins to grow. It starts as quiet disappointment, but over time it can transform into deep resentment, and often it gets directed at the person who does seem to be receiving that recognition. You. This is one of the most subtle forms of hate. It's not about anything you've done to harm someone, but about what you've been given, or, more accurately, what someone else feels they've been denied. Maybe you were promoted when they weren't. Maybe people praise your talents while theirs go unnoticed. Maybe your confidence is interpreted as arrogance, simply because they're still waiting for someone to acknowledge their worth. It's painful, but it's real. Your success can sometimes become a source of someone else's suffering, not because it took anything from them, but because it reminds them of everything they feel they lack. In Stoic philosophy, we learn that external validation is fleeting. Seneca warned against anchoring our self-worth in applause. The approval of the crowd is a weak foundation, he wrote. A wise person builds their identity on internal standards, not external praise. But not everyone lives by this discipline. Many people tie their sense of self to whether or not they're seen, celebrated, or applauded. And when that recognition doesn't come, it shakes their identity. And rather than confronting that pain, they redirect it, often toward those who seem to have what they're missing. So what happens next? You become a symbol of what they don't have. You become the face of their frustration, not because you've hurt them, but because your wins feel personal to them. In their mind, your recognition diminishes theirs. And even if there's room for both of you to shine, they can't see it that way, because comparison has blinded them. Now here's the Stoic response. Don't take it personally. When someone begins to treat you differently, grows cold, or becomes distant simply because you've been acknowledged, it's not your job to fix them or hide your light. It's your job to remain grounded, to keep doing good work, not for recognition, but because it's aligned with your purpose, because it reflects your values, because it's who you are. Recognition is not a competition, it's not a limited resource, but the ego often convinces people otherwise. The ego says, if they are seen, then I am not. And this false scarcity is what fuels resentment. It convinces people that there's only room for one person to succeed, to be praised, to be validated, and so they push others down, hoping to lift themselves up. But you don't have to participate in that cycle. You can step out of the need for approval. You can let others chase recognition while you chase mastery. You can let others seek applause while you seek alignment, and you can continue to live in a way that honors your path, even if it stirs discomfort in others. That doesn't mean you ignore their pain. It means you don't absorb it. If someone close to you feels unseen, encourage them. Celebrate their strengths, acknowledge their efforts, but don't shrink yourself to protect their ego. True support is not about becoming smaller. It's about helping others rise with you. And if your recognition becomes the reason someone hates you, let that be a reminder of how powerful visibility is. It has the power to inspire and the power to trigger. Not everyone will be happy for you. Not everyone will clap when you win. Some will question why it's you and not them. And that's okay. That's part of the path. The Stoic doesn't live for recognition. They live for principle. They act with excellence because it's right, not because it's rewarded. And when recognition comes, they receive it with humility. When it doesn't, they remain steady. That's true power. That's true peace. So if you find yourself disliked because others feel invisible in your presence, remember, their resentment isn't proof you've done something wrong. It's proof that your presence has become noticeable. And instead of dimming that light, let it shine even brighter. Not to prove anything, but to remain aligned with who you are. Because you were not born to live small. You were not born to beg for approval or apologize for being seen. You were born to embody purpose, to stand tall in your truth, and to keep walking forward even when others can't yet see their own worth. 10. Your boundaries disturb their control. Sometimes people don't hate you because you wronged them. They hate you because you stopped allowing them to cross the line. When you set a boundary, when you say no, when you decide to honor your peace instead of constantly pleasing others, it sends a clear message. I am not here to be controlled. And that alone is enough to trigger people who once relied on your silence, your compliance, or your guilt to get what they wanted. The truth is, many relationships are built not on mutual respect, but on unspoken power dynamics. One person gives too much. The other takes without limit. One avoids conflict. The other dominates the space. But when that pattern changes, when you finally recognize your worth and draw the line, it threatens the entire structure of the relationship. Suddenly, you're not so easy to manipulate. You're not so predictable. You're not so available. And for someone who built their sense of comfort on your lack of boundaries, this shift feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's growth. Setting boundaries isn't about punishment. It's about self-respect. It's saying, I will no longer tolerate what drains me. It's saying, my peace matters too. And if someone resents you for protecting your energy, that resentment reveals who they really were all along. Because the people who truly value you will never be angry at your boundaries. They'll appreciate them. Only those who benefited from your lack of limits will feel offended when you finally draw the line. From a Stoic perspective, boundaries are essential. They allow us to focus our energy on what we can control: our time, our effort, our emotional well-being. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That includes saying yes when we mean no. That includes staying silent when something violates our values. Boundaries are not barriers, they are guides. They help us live with integrity. They remind us to act in accordance with reason, not pressure or guilt. Yet people will often mistake your boundaries for arrogance. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're selfish. But what they're really saying is, I can't control you anymore. And that's uncomfortable, for them, not for you. You might find that when you begin enforcing your boundaries, people start pulling away. Let them. Their distance isn't your loss, it's your clarity. Not everyone is meant to walk with you as you grow. Some people are only comfortable with the version of you that tolerated mistreatment, that said yes out of fear, that bent over backwards to avoid conflict. But you're not that version anymore. And yes, there will be grief in this process. Letting go of relationships that can't withstand your truth is painful. But what's more painful is staying small for the sake of people who never respected your full self to begin with. Stoicism teaches us to remain indifferent to what we cannot control. And you cannot control how others react to your boundaries. But you can control how you respond. You can choose peace over guilt. You can choose strength over apology. You can choose your own well-being over someone else's comfort. Remember this. People who fear your boundaries are often the ones who never truly saw you. They only saw what they could take from you. And when that access is denied, they reveal themselves, not as friends, not as partners, but as opportunists. And that realization, as painful as it is also freedom. So stand firm. If your boundaries cost you someone, let them go. What you'll gain is far more valuable: self-trust, peace of mind, emotional clarity. And most importantly, space for relationships built on mutual respect, not silent resentment. Setting boundaries is not a sign of distance. It's a sign of maturity. It says, I love myself enough to protect my energy, and I love you enough to be honest about what I can and cannot give. And anyone who cannot respect that is choosing to walk away from your truth, not the other way around. In the end, living with boundaries doesn't mean you're hard to love. It means you've stopped making yourself easy to use. And the more you walk in that truth, the more you'll realize the right people will never be threatened by your self-respect. They'll be inspired by it. That is the Stoic way. Quiet strength, firm principles, and a life rooted in what you can control. Your character, your decisions, and the lines you refuse to cross for the sake of false peace. So now you know people don't always hate you for what you've done. Often they hate you for what you represent. Your confidence, your peace, your success, your truth, your refusal to be controlled. These things make you a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They reflect what others may not be ready to face in themselves. You're not responsible for their insecurity, their envy, or their emotional reactions. You're responsible for your growth, your values, and the way you carry yourself through life. Whether it's envy, misunderstanding, a clash of values, gossip, projection, lack of empathy, rivalry, social pressure, unmet recognition, or your boundaries. Each form of resentment is just a different mask for internal conflict. And when people aren't at peace with themselves, they can never be at peace with you. But here's the most important truth. You don't have to change to please anyone. You don't have to apologize for your progress. You don't have to dim your light just to make others feel comfortable in their shadows. Stoicism teaches us to anchor ourselves not in public opinion, but in inner virtue. You walk with clarity, you speak with intention, you act with principle, and you let others respond however they choose, because their response is not your responsibility. Let go of the need to be understood by everyone. Let go of the pressure to win every heart. The people who are meant for you will not be threatened by your strength. They will be drawn to it. They will respect your boundaries. They will appreciate your growth. They will walk beside you not because they need something from you, but because they value who you truly are. So keep going. Keep becoming. Keep standing tall in your truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others. Because in doing so, you create space for your peace, for your purpose, and for the kind of life that isn't built on fear, but on freedom. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this video spoke to your journey? And if you're not sure what to say, just type strength to let me know you made it to the end, and that you're choosing self-mastery over approval. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with us on this journey towards Stoic wisdom and emotional clarity. I've linked 2 more videos here to help you keep growing. Remember, you were not born to be liked. You were born to live with truth. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.